This is my first AMD build. I decided to do a bunch of firsts. Air cooling instead of water cooling, and also trying out a new thermal paste technique. Even these aftermarket cable mod cables, which came in while I was messing around with the air cooler, I'll up a separate vid showing these cables being installed later. Now this is the airflow I will be using inside the Phanteks P600S case. Cool air coming in from the front and out as shown in the red lines. Here is the Noctua DH-15S Chromax Black CPU air cooler. Huge. Here are the parts used. Motherboard backplate, 2 brackets, 4 spacers and 4 screws. The 4 spacers installed under the 2 metal brackets are shown in the top drawing. Note, I am using an AMD AM4 CPU. The number 4 screw hole needs to be used instead of the number 3. Before putting the Noctua air cooler on, the stock CPU retention cooler brackets need to be taken off the motherboard. The backplate, which comes installed on the motherboard, will fall off, so both hands were needed and I didn't have my camera on recording for this section. Now for the thermal paste. I have done the P-size lines and so on before, but my favorite is my trusted 4-line star pattern. However, I decided to do a spread application for this new build instead. Here is the messy thermal paste application. Spreading the paste with a plastic bag. Wipe off the excess around the edges to prevent drips over the side of the CPU onto the motherboard. After installing the air cooler, I noticed something. I messed up. The Noctua air cooler is installed the wrong way. I didn't realize it was not a symmetrical air tower. One side is longer than the other. There is no way I can install the graphics card without the fins of the air cooler being too close or rubbing against the graphics card. It's time to take this thing back off and turn it around. I checked the thermal paste pattern after taking it off. It's actually not bad. A bit too much on the cooler's edge, but really good coverage on the CPU. For reference, here's my older Intel CPU with my trusty 4-line star pattern in my past builds. I use very thin lines to get an even spread using Arctic Silver 5 since it dispenses out of the tube really easily. Here are a couple more picks and other motherboards. Intel 5820K CPU on top, and a Corsair HX1000i GTX AIO water cooler on the bottom. Notice the nice even spread using the 4-line star pattern. Time to clean this mess off. 99% isopropyl alcohol and paper towel to the rescue. Nice and squeaky clean. Here is the old Arctic Silver 5 in a small tube and a Noctua NT-H1 thermal paste. The Noctua paste is much thicker than the Arctic Silver. I decided to reuse the Noctua paste out of curiosity. Will a thicker paste make a difference versus a thinner paste? Not really a good comparison since this is a new build versus my old build, but you get the idea. I tried for a thin X pattern again, but that never happened. This was the best I could get. The Noctua paste was pretty thick. It ain't pretty, but it's on there. Putting the cooler back in, this time the right way. Double checking the orientation just to be sure. Making sure the fan clips are on really tight on both sides. Double checking the CPU fan lead to the motherboard CPU fan connector. Time to do some benching. Power supply on. Computer on. Case closed. I am doing real-world tests in an enclosed case with all my background processes on, just like I would in the day-to-day activities. I am using Libre Monitor to keep an eye on the system and benchmarking with Spec Workstation 3. Links to this benchmark in the description below. I prefer to use this since it uses real-world programs that are run on a day-to-day basis. Just select the work field you are in and run it. This is an initial run to see if the Noctua air cooler and my messy thermal paste will hold up. Skipping through the tests, 3 cores hit the 5 GHz mark and the highest CPU temp was around 86 Celsius. Max power draw was around 142.5 watts. With Cinebench R23 stress test, the 3090 GPU hit 389.5 watts, so my power supply had more than enough power to handle my day-to-day usage. I've been running the system for the past few weeks and it handles everything I throw at it. So in summary, in the past I've tried a few different thermal paste application techniques. It really does not make much of a difference, as long as it goes on evenly and you have a good CPU cooler. This prevents CPU throttling and overheating. My temps were well within the range and very cool once the system was broken in after about 150 plus hours of varying use. CPU idle temps are around 34 to 36 Celsius, and with light usage such as browsing, checking emails, the temps can bounce up to around 38 degrees Celsius. Doing heavy work such as 4K editing and rendering, it moves up to a low 60 to low 70s. Running it at max, it hits low 80s, and then I can hear the fan spin up and increase speed to bring the CPU temp back down into the 60-70s range. The fans will then go back to normal RPM, so the system is very cool, stable, and quiet. By the way, no overclocking. The CPU hits 5 GHz on various cores all on its own, and the little performance I can squeeze out of it is not worth the extra heat and stress. I do have DOCP RAM timing enabled and a resizable bar on with the latest NVIDIA drivers. The only thing I might do is increase the RAM timings a bit from stock DDR3200, and that's about it for overclocking the system. So for my first AMD build, I'm very happy with this messy thermal paste installed and really good system performance.